Chinese phone maker Honor has just now fully unveiled a brand new folding phone. So in this video, we're going to very quickly run through what we know about this device as of now. Personally, I think that it looks quite good, and there is one thing about it that I think is a very good step forward into the right direction. Unfortunately, as we go through this thread of information, I don't think that this device is going to be landing stateside if you're in the United States. While, we'll talk about this a bit later, I can't find anyone indicating that this thing is actually going to come to the United States. You'll probably still be forced to import this thing, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the video. This is it. This is the Honor Magic VS, and personally, from just a visual perspective, I think that the thing looks very nice. That like turquoise, bluish, greenish color, I think looks fantastic. You can't go wrong with black. Even the orange is a pretty cool, it's like a mandarin almost color. Very, very cool. Let's dig into some of this information though. So, super light from 261 grams, and that is in fact a very, very light device. I just dropped my Z Fold 4 onto a scale. Granted, it's got this case on it, but it was like over 320 grams. So, 261, that's a pretty lightweight device in terms of a foldable. But what's really cool about this is it's got a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is a very, very large battery for a device that is that lightweight. And I think you can tell by looking at it here that it's rather thin. That's a pretty, that's a pretty thin piece of hardware. We've got another better picture that shows that a bit more coming up, and apparently that's because they've totally re-engineered the hinge. This is similar to what Samsung talked about with the Z Fold and the Z Flip 4s, that they re-engineered the hinge to make the thing thinner and lighter. Well, they've evidently done something similar and perhaps had some really nice success in doing this. And again, to have a battery that big and a device that light and that thin, very, very impressive. Magic Pen low latency. So there is a stylus that you can get with this device, similar to Samsung. There's no hole, silo, if you will, to put the pin inside the device. So you have to have some sort of case or some way to carry it with you. So very similar to the Fold in that regard. Charging will be capped at 66 watts, which is very, very fast, much faster than what Samsung does. So on this first page here, we're looking pretty good. Moving along, it is running the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, so the same processor, same SoC as the Galaxy Z Fold 4. You'd like to see the 8 Gen 2, but, whatever, the 8 Plus Gen 1 is still very, very fast. This thing is not going to be slow by any stretch of the imagination. Options are 12 gigs of RAM with either 256 or 512 gigs of storage. There's also a cheaper variant. There's 8 gigs of RAM and 256 storage, and that starts out what would be equivalent to $1,048 in America. And that was one of the things I said we'd talk about here in a minute. That was a big feature or a big step in the right direction. That price is outstanding. Now, unfortunately, if it does not come to America, you're probably not going to be paying $1,100 for it. You have to import the thing, and you're going to have to pay a bit more. But as long as that import fee isn't like super, super crazy, there might be a pretty strong argument to be made for importing this thing, as long as the software is okay and it works well on our carriers, which theoretically it should be generally okay in that scenario. $1,048, that's like I said, a really nice step in the right direction. The Fold 4 is $1,800. Okay. It's a big reduction in price. The inner tablet display is 7.9 inches with a resolution of 2272 by 1984. These are always very strange resolutions just because they're slightly odd-shaped devices. It's only got a 90 hertz refresh rate on the tablet display. It's a little bit weird because it's actually 120 on the external display, so it kind of seems backwards to me. But whatever, it is what it is. 800 nits of peak brightness is just okay. It's not incredible, but for a screen like that, it's going to be fine. The external OLED, the cover display, 6.45 inches, 2560 by 1080, and then a 120 hertz refresh rate. So 1080p, but very tall on that cover display. And I think that the cover display, if I actually have a picture here that shows it a bit better, it seems fine. It's nice and wide. It's a little bit tall for my liking, but it seems like a decent looking cover display. If we keep moving here, looking at the cameras, I think that they should be pretty impressive, right? 54 megapixel main camera, 50 megapixel ultra wide, and an 8 megapixel 3x tele puts it, right there in line with other, premium flagship cameras. In fact, that ultra wide is better than something on paper. You have to see the actual results, but on paper could be better than what we have on the Fold 4. Tele should be very, very similar. And then a pair of 16 megapixel cameras for the selfies, both hole punches, inner and outer. So that camera setup should be pretty good. And Honor, their cameras have been getting better and better over the last few years. So I think this is probably going to be a pretty solid camera setup. Now, this is a picture from The Verge where I talked about how thin this thing looked. You can see there's like no gap between the two halves of the device. You can see how razor thin this thing is. Very, very impressive stuff here. Honestly, this level of thinness and the way that it's closing flat like that kind of puts me in the mind of the leaks that we recently saw of the upcoming Google Pixel Fold. I think it's kind of in that same ballpark, which tells you that this kind of stuff is possible. It just looks really, really solid. Now, as I have written here, pre-orders are now available in China with an international release apparently planned for later on. Now, I looked around. I read several different articles looking for someone saying anything about the United States. None of them do. I could not find a single article that mentioned any plans of coming stateside. Typically, what I saw written was Honor plans on releasing this globally. UK and EU specifically called out, and then other countries and regions next year. What does that mean? I don't know. Do they have a history of launching their devices in America? No, they do not. There's also, I don't think that there's any like embargoes against Honor. This stuff is stuff I've not really followed that closely, but Honor used to be like part of Huawei. I don't know, Huawei can't be like sold here or something like that. There's an embargo against Huawei. I don't think Honor's been caught up in that because I think technically they were like spun off into their own company. I may be wrong about that, but I don't think that that's the case. But at any rate, I don't see any obvious reason to think that this thing will be coming stateside. Probably going to have to import it, but again, since you're starting out at $1,048, maybe that import price won't be that crazy. I think this thing looks really, really impressive, and I'm excited to see more companies like this make folding devices and make them cheaper and cheaper, because right now they're prohibitively expensive. I mean, the Pixel Fold is rumored to be $1,800, which I get it. There's a lot of tech in these things. They're very, very fancy devices, but $1,800 is a lot of dollars, and it's hard for people to buy these things. So getting them closer and closer to that $1,000 mark, that's where people are, we're kind of used to paying $1,000 for flagships, but $1,800 is so much more than that. So if we can get these companies making these things, and that can become more normal, let's have options. Let's have the Uber premium at $1,800. That's fine, but then let's have some cheaper stuff too, right? There's rumors that Samsung might want to make an A series of the Fold. Do that, right? Make a cheaper version of the Fold for, to let more people into the wonderful world of folding devices. Guys, that's pretty much all I have for you on this one. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on more content just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friend.